Is there something that you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah, there's there's a lot of times you come to these decision points where you have to decide what are you going to do, and I had a bunch of these, but I think I made the right decisions in the end, and I think it's because what we talked about before, which is you try to sort of critically examine what is it that you're best at, and what is kind of the second and third and whatever. But I mean, for example, as a teenager, I was really into cartooning and comic strips, and that's actually it's a big thing in the US, but it's actually also a big thing in Europe, although they have very different strips. So in the US, everything seems to be geared towards superheroes for some reason. Like that's all comics are about, well, more about back then. I mean, we have, of course, more sophisticated graphic novels, things like that. But in Europe, actually, comics like Asterix or Tintin or things like that, were actually, they were much more about like, hey, here's a reporter having adventures or some guy fighting Romans or whatever. But they weren't, well, Asterix, I guess, was kind of a super, but not even really because he had to drink something.
It's like Vikings. And
yeah, exactly. It was kind of, that stuff. And so I really got into this and enjoyed this. And I was pretty good at art. And so I actually wrote graphic novels. I have like literally 60-page long, full, graphic novels. I never sold them or did anything with them. They're just sitting in a drawer at home. But I enjoyed doing that a lot. And at some point I was actually, I even did like strips, comics, strips for like a newspaper, school newspaper. And I was thinking, I had something called the Eggheads, which was like a short strip about eggs with legs. And I thought, and I was reading the Sunday comics in newspapers, which doesn't exist anymore. But back then, the Sunday edition of the newspaper would have and I looked at some of these and I thought, like, I don't know, my thing is just about as good. I think I could write this. But I finally actually made the decision not to do that, even though I had an aptitude for it. And the reason was that I had a feeling that if I were to do this, I would eventually get locked into doing this like a chore almost. Like you have to deliver one of these every week, whether you have a good idea that week or not. And not only that, I mean, if you do this for years, there's like comic strips that have been around for like probably 100 years, well, maybe not quite 100, but like decade after decade. I figured if that happens to me, eventually I'll probably get bored of it or tired. But then I'm kind of locked in because there's an audience and they want that, to be done. This happened, by the way, to the author of Tintin. He went nuts in late life because there were expectations of what Tintin books were supposed to look like, and he didn't want to fulfill them any longer. Whereas in science, I figured, I'm never going to get bored because there's like new stuff. I might get bored of doing a certain subject because I think I figured out enough about it now, and it's time to investigate something else. But there's always something else that's really different, and it's very easy to go from one thing to another thing in science. And so in the end, that had a great appeal to me. And then there were these other things, like I think I would have done pretty well actually in computer science, but again, I don't feel too bad. But there were other things where the decision was more obvious. Like I also like music a lot. I play pipe organ. I actually built a pipe organ that's sitting in my basement, although I don't have enough time to play on it these days. But I was actually interested in music, and at one point even considered becoming a pipe organist and composer would actually be kind of neat. But then the same thing happened as with the mathematicians. I went to the School of Music and I got to meet real pipe organ students and composers. And it's like, whoa. These people are so much faster. Like I would actually write music, so I have composed music, but these people are so much more facile at it. I mean, it's almost effortless, and they do it. And I realized that again, I'll never be at that level of being able to do it with that kind of ease. And so, whereas doing scientific research in chemistry and related math and all those physical chemistry and the related math and all that really there was a certain ease to it that I felt like this is natural to me. And that's why in the end I stuck with that. So no regrets.
I can relate with a lot of what you're saying because like even though I'm studying engineering, but there are a lot of other things which I really enjoy doing as well, like photography or like playing the piano or like sketching, as you mentioned. I used to do all of that as a kid, but as you grow up, like you need to prioritize some things.
That's
and then, right? As you mentioned, like you stop the habit of like playing because you don't get the time, right? As much. So
that's right. And I still play.
Right.
So I do it, right? But I play like an hour or two a week. And if you want to be really good at an instrument like pipe organ or piano or something like that, even as an amateur, actually, you have to play an hour a day or so. Professionals play 8 hours a day practicing, right, to really maintain that facility. So I still do all these things. I mean, I sketch as well and do all of this, these things that I sort of enjoy doing, but at a much lower volume, right? Because in the end, you have to kind of concentrate on the things that you do best and that you want to really make progress with. And they do take time too, right? The scientific research takes time. Even like the ultra sports that I do, because as I said, I'm not good at tennis, right? So I went on to that side of things. It's a time investment. You actually have to spend time to be good at it, right? And that's one thing where I decided, I am going to spend the time to be good at it. And other things I sort of did I'll do it for an hour a week because I enjoy it, and I'm not good at it anymore. But I don't care, right? I'm just doing it for fun.